Millionaire sees 8-year-old twin girls crying at his wife's grave. What one says, "Mommy is still alive," reveals a shocking truth. Just before we begin, your presence means a lot. Say hi and share where you're tuning in from only if you want to. The autumn wind whispered through the cemetery's ancient oaks, scattering golden leaves across the quiet pathways. Jackson Hayes pulled his cashmere coat tighter around his broad shoulders as he approached the marble headstone that had become his annual pilgrimage. 10 years as a tech billionaire had hardened him against most emotions. But this day, the anniversary of Eleanor Porter's death, always stripped away his carefully constructed armor. He placed a single white rose on the cold stone, his fingers lingering on the engraved name, Eleanor Porter. 1989-2017. Beloved mother and daughter. His throat tightened as memories flooded back. Her laugh, her brilliance, the way she challenged him when no one else dared. "Another year without answers," he whispered, the words carried away by the wind. Soft sound caught his attention, a whimper barely audible over the rustling leaves. Jackson turned, his steel blue eyes scanning the cemetery until they landed on two small figures huddled beside Eleanor's grave. Two little girls, mirror images of each other with golden curls and tear-stained cheeks, knelt on the damp ground. They couldn't have been more than 8 years old, dressed in matching blue coats that had seen better days. "Mommy's still alive, I know she is," one of them whispered fiercely, her small hand tracing the letters on the headstone. Jackson froze. The words struck him like physical blows. Eleanor had children? Twins? His mind raced, calculating timelines and possibilities. "Emma," the social worker said, "we have to accept it," the other girl said, her voice breaking. "But I don't want to." "They're wrong, Olivia. I feel her. I still feel her." Jackson approached slowly, not wanting to frighten them. "Hello there," he said gently. The girls jerked their heads up, eyes wide with momentary fear that quickly gave way to curiosity. Something about their faces, the shape of their eyes, the determined set of their jaws, struck him with uncomfortable familiarity. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to startle you," he continued. "I knew Eleanor." The girls exchanged a glance loaded with meaning, a silent communication that only twins could master. "You knew our mom?" asked the one called Emma, her voice suddenly sharp with hope. Jackson nodded, kneeling down to their level despite the expensive fabric of his tailored suit pressing against the damp ground. "I did, a long time ago." "No one believes us," Olivia said suddenly, her small hands clenched into fists. "No one believes that she's still out there." Emma's eyes, startlingly intelligent, studied Jackson's face. "Why do you come here? Everyone else has forgotten her." The question pierced through Jackson's carefully constructed defenses. Why did he come year after year? Eleanor had vanished from his life long before her reported death. Their relationship had burned bright and ended, abruptly leaving only ashes and questions. "I could never forget your mother," he answered truthfully. The girls looked at each other again, that silent twin communication passing between them. "Why does nobody believe us?" Emma asked, her voice small yet defiant. Something inexplicable pulled at Jackson's heart, a connection he couldn't explain, a responsibility he hadn't sought. These children, with their unwavering faith and fierce determination, reminded him of someone. Of Eleanor. Of himself, before success had calcified his heart. "I'll believe you," he heard himself say, the words surprising him as much as the girls. "Tell me why you think your mother is still alive." Their faces transformed with matching expressions of hope, the first ray of sunlight breaking through storm clouds. In that moment, something fundamental shifted in Jackson Hayes' world. He didn't understand why these children's pain resonated so deeply within him, why their conviction stirred something long dormant in his soul. "You will?" Olivia whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. Jackson nodded, an unspoken promise forming. "I will. I want to hear everything." Behind them, a woman in a sensible coat approached with concern etched on her face. "Girls, you can't just run off like that." "I'm so sorry, sir, if they've bothered you." But Jackson barely heard her. His eyes remained fixed on the twins' faces, a strange sensation washing over him, like pieces of a puzzle he never knew existed, suddenly revealing. Their edges. They're not bothering me at all, he said firmly. In fact, I think we have a lot to talk about. How many characters would you like for the next chapter? Jackson led the small group to a quiet cafe across from the cemetery. The establishment's warm lighting contrasted sharply with the gray afternoon outside. The woman who had approached them, Martha Wilson, introduced herself as the twins' temporary guardian. I work with family services, she explained quietly while the girls sat at a nearby table, heads bent together in whispered conversation. They've been through so much since Eleanor's accident last year. The foster system is challenging for them. Jackson nodded, his eyes never leaving the twins. How did you know Eleanor? I didn't personally. I was assigned to their case after. Martha hesitated. Emma and Olivia are special children. Brilliant, like their mother apparently was, but they cling to this belief that she's still alive. The therapist says it's their way of coping. A waitress brought hot chocolates for the girls and coffee for the adults. Jackson approached the twins' table, sitting down across from them. Tell me about your mother, he said gently. Emma, the more analytical of the two, studied him with eyes too wise for her age. Mom was a scientist. She worked with medicines to help sick people. She was always writing in her special notebook, Olivia added, the one with the lock that had all her secrets. Emma nodded. Before the accident, she was acting weird, scared. She kept saying some people were dangerous. She'd whisper on the phone at night, Olivia continued. We weren't supposed to hear, but we did. Jackson leaned forward. What did she say? That she found something bad. That people could get hurt, Emma replied. She said she had proof and needed to tell someone important. Martha sighed. The police investigated thoroughly after the car accident. There was nothing suspicious. Because they didn't look, Olivia protested. Mom left us clues. She knew something might happen. Emma reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded photograph. This was in her special box. She said if anything happened to her, we should remember this picture. Jackson took the photo and his heart stopped. It showed a younger Eleanor laughing on a university campus, her arm around a younger version of himself. He remembered that day perfectly. It was taken 10 years ago, during their final semester together at MIT. That's you, Emma said simply. Jackson couldn't speak, staring at the evidence of a past he'd tried to forget. Martha looked confused. You knew Eleanor well? We were together in college, Jackson managed to say, his mind racing. But we lost touch years ago. Mom never told us much about our dad, Olivia said softly. Just that he was someone important, too important to be part of our lives. Jackson studied their faces more carefully now. The shape of their eyes, the determined set of their chins, the analytical gaze. Traits he saw every morning in the mirror. Traits his mother had passed to him. The realization hit him with stunning clarity. These weren't just Eleanor's daughters, they were his. The drive to Jackson's penthouse was silent, his mind a tempest of calculations and memories. 10 years ago, Eleanor had vanished from his life without explanation. 9 years ago, these girls were born. The timeline fit perfectly. In his spacious living room overlooking the city skyline, Jackson paced while Martha made phone calls to approve the girls' temporary visit. Emma and Olivia sat wide-eyed on his leather sofa, looking impossibly small against the backdrop of modern luxury. Your home is bigger than our whole apartment building, Olivia whispered. Jackson stopped pacing. I didn't always live like this. When did you know our mom? Emma asked, her analytical mind clearly making connections. Jackson sat across from them, choosing his words carefully. We met at college, MIT. We were both studying technology, though your mother was more interested in biomedical applications. That's where she became a scientist. Olivia nodded. She was brilliant, Jackson continued, memories washing over him. far smarter than I was. Everyone knew she'd change the world someday. What happened between you? Emma's question was direct, unflinching. Jackson's jaw tightened. We were together for almost 3 years. Then one day she was just gone. No explanation, no goodbye. I tried to find her, but she disappeared completely. He omitted the crushing devastation he'd felt, how her abandonment had hardened him, fueled his relentless drive to succeed, how he'd built his tech empire partly to prove she'd made a mistake in leaving. Did you know she worked for Bennett Pharmaceuticals? Jackson asked. Martha looked up from her paperwork. Yes, she was a senior researcher there. Dr. Maxwell Bennett himself wrote her recommendation letter after she died. The name hit Jackson like a physical blow. Maxwell Bennett, his former mentor turned bitter rival. The man who had taken him under his wing at MIT, then subtly tried to control his career path. The same man who had always seemed unnervingly interested in Eleanor's research. Bennett, Jackson whispered, pieces clicking into place. He remembered Bennett's frequent comments about Eleanor being a distraction from Jackson's potential. How Bennett had offered Jackson funding for his first startup immediately after Eleanor disappeared. The timing he'd never questioned, because he'd been too consumed by heartbreak and ambition. I need to see Eleanor's research, Jackson said suddenly. You mentioned a notebook? Emma nodded. It has a special lock. We couldn't open it. Where is it now? With our things at Martha's house, Olivia replied. Mom said it was important that people's lives depended on what she found. Martha's phone rang, breaking the moment. After a brief conversation, she turned to Jackson. That was my supervisor. Due to your previous connection to Eleanor, they've approved an extended visit. The girls can stay tonight if they'd like, and we'll reassess tomorrow. Jackson nodded, a strange protective feeling surging within him. I'd like that. After Martha left with promises to return with overnight bags, Jackson stood at his window, watching the city lights flicker to life as dusk fell. Behind him, his daughters, whispered together on the sofa. His phone vibrated with a message from an unlisted number. Heard you met Eleanor's twins today. We should talk about old times. MB. Jackson's blood ran cold. Bennett was watching. And Bennett never reached out without purpose. What had Eleanor discovered that was worth hiding? What had she died or disappeared to protect? And most importantly, why had Bennett kept him from knowing his own children? When Martha returned with the girls' belongings, Jackson noticed their meager possessions, a small suitcase each, with clothes that had seen better days. Emma clutched a worn backpack protectively against her chest. It's in here, she said once Martha had left, carefully unzipping the bag to reveal a leather-bound journal with an unusual mechanical lock. Mom's special notebook. Jackson examined. The lock, not electronic, but a complex puzzle mechanism. This is brilliant, he murmured. A lock that can't be hacked. We tried to open it, Olivia admitted. But it's too hard. Jackson reached for his phone. I know someone who might help. Within an hour, Camila Rodriguez arrived. His head of security was a former intelligence operative with skills that extended far beyond normal corporate protection. Interesting, Camila said, examining the diary. Reminds me of cryptographic mechanisms from the Cold War era. Your Eleanor was serious about keeping this private. While Camilla worked on the lock, Jackson ordered dinner and showed the twins around the penthouse. Their eyes widened at his home automation system. You make this? Emma asked, watching lights respond to voice commands. My company did. We specialize in intelligent systems that learn from human behavior. Like the robots in Mom's stories? Olivia's eyes brightened. Not quite that advanced, Jackson smiled. Not yet anyway. I've got it, Camilla called from the living room. The diary lay open on the coffee table. The first pages contained research notes, chemical formulations, and molecular diagrams beyond Jackson's expertise. But further in, Eleanor's elegant handwriting shifted to personal entries. March 12th. The phase the 3rd. Trials data doesn't match what was submitted to the FDA. Patient deaths in the original study were recategorized under different causes. Neuralin is dangerous, but Bennett altered the reports. March 20th. Discovered cardiac abnormalities in 18% of patients, not the 2% reported. Bennett personally ordered these findings removed before submission. April 3rd. Bennett knows I've been accessing the original files. Victoria watching me constantly. Must protect the girls. If something happens, the evidence is with Diana. Jackson looked up, his face grim. Eleanor was documenting fraud. Bennett Pharmaceuticals falsified safety data for their flagship drug. That why Mom had to hide? Olivia asked. Before Jackson could answer, his security system alerted him to a visitor. On the monitor, he saw Maxwell Bennett himself standing at his private elevator. Take the girls to the guest room, Jackson told Camilla urgently. Keep them there until he's gone. Bennett entered with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to power. At 60, his silver hair and tailored suit projected authority, but Jackson now recognized the calculated coldness in his eyes. Jackson, Bennett smiled without warmth. Been a while. What do you want, Maxwell? Can an old mentor check in? I hear you've taken an interest in Eleanor Porter's children. Jackson kept his expression neutral. News travels fast. Small world, Bennett replied, glancing around the penthouse. Tragic about Eleanor. Brilliant mind. Yes, she was, Jackson said carefully. Bennett's eyes sharpened. The girls are staying with you? Interesting choice by social services. Temporary arrangement. Bennett nodded slowly. Children need stability. Perhaps Bennett Pharmaceuticals could establish a trust fund for Eleanor's memory. The threat was veiled but clear. Bennett was asserting control. I'll handle their needs, Jackson said firmly. As Bennett left, he paused. Those girls have Eleanor's eyes, don't you think? But something about them reminds me of someone else. Good genes. His smile was predatory. Be careful, Jackson. Parenting can be hazardous. After the elevator doors closed, Jackson leaned against the wall, heart pounding. Bennett knew. And Bennett wanted Eleanor's research, and possibly the twins, under his control. Jackson returned to the diary, more determined than ever to uncover what Eleanor had discovered, and why it might have cost her her life. The morning after Bennett's unsettling visit, Jackson arranged for enhanced security measures. Camilla stationed 2 additional team members in the building and implemented advanced surveillance protocols. We're being watched, she informed Jackson privately. There's a black sedan that circled the block 6 times. Professional surveillance team. Jackson nodded grimly. I need to know everything about Eleanor's work at Bennett Pharmaceuticals, and I want to meet anyone who worked closely with her. While the twins explored the penthouse library with Camilla, Jackson began his investigation. In earnest, he contacted his corporate intelligence team to discreetly gather information on Bennett's operations, Eleanor's research history, and the drug Neuralin. By afternoon, Jackson was reviewing preliminary reports in his home office when Emma slipped. Inside, her observant eyes taking in the multiple screens displaying data. Are you looking for Mom's secrets? She asked. Jackson hesitated, then nodded. I am. I think your mother discovered something dangerous and some powerful people might have wanted to stop her. Emma's face remained serious. She knew they were coming. That's why she made plans. She climbed onto a chair beside Jackson. I remember watching her burn papers in the kitchen sink. She was crying. When was this? Jackson asked gently. The week before she died. She kept saying they won't hurt my girls. Emma's analytical gaze met Jackson's. She was protecting us from someone. The revelation sent a chill through Jackson. Emma, do you remember anyone unusual coming to your house? Anyone who might have been watching your mother? Emma thought carefully. A woman with red hair came to dinner once. Mom was tense. They argued after she thought we were asleep. Do you know her name? Dr. Victoria. Mom called her Vic. They used to be friends, but then Mom said she chose the wrong side. Victoria Coldwell, Bennett's research director and right hand. Jackson made a mental note to investigate her more thoroughly. An alert from his security system diverted his attention. Someone had arrived at the private elevator. The monitor showed a thin woman with anxious eyes and a lab coat tucked into her bag. Sarah Wang, she identified herself to the security camera. I was Eleanor Porter's research assistant. I need to speak with Mr. Hayes. After security cleared Sarah entered the penthouse clearly uncomfortable with the luxury surroundings. Her gaze softened when she spotted the twins reading in the living room. Emma, Olivia, she said with genuine warmth. You've grown so much. The twins rushed to embrace her, confirming her identity better than any security check could have. In Jackson's office, with the door closed, Sarah spoke in hurried, nervous tones. I shouldn't be here. They're watching all of Dr. Porter's former associates. But when I heard you'd taken the twins in, she twisted her hands anxiously. Dr. Porter talked about you, you know. Not often, but sometimes I'd catch her looking at an old photo. Why have you come, Sarah? Jackson asked directly. Because Eleanor prepared for her own death, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. The accident was too convenient, too perfectly timed. She had just compiled all the evidence of data manipulation on Neuralin trials. Sarah pulled a flash drive from her pocket. Eleanor gave me this the day before she died, said it was her life insurance. I was supposed to release it if anything happened to her, but I was too afraid. Bennett has connections everywhere, police, FDA, media. Jackson took the drive, his expression grave. What does it contain? Raw data from the original trials. Patient records showing cardiac failures systematically recoded as unrelated complications. Internal emails ordering the manipulation of data. Bennett personally directing which adverse events should be hidden. Why didn't she go public? Jackson asked. Sarah's eyes darted to the door. She was going to. Had a meeting scheduled with an investigative reporter. But she was also terrified. For the twins. She lowered her voice further. Bennett made threats, not directly but through Victoria, said that single mothers could face unfortunate accidents, leaving their children in the system. Jackson's jaw tightened. So she was gathering evidence carefully, building an airtight case. Yes, Sarah confirmed, and there's more. Neuralin was just the beginning. They're preparing to launch a pediatric version despite knowing the risks are even higher for children. The implication was staggering. Thousands of children could be endangered by a medication known to be unsafe. There's one more thing, Sarah continued. In those final weeks, Eleanor kept saying she had a nuclear option if anything happened to her. Something that would destroy Bennett completely. She never told me what it was, but it gave her courage. Jackson thought of the diary, still only partially decoded. Did she have any unusual research sites, private labs, off-site locations? Sarah hesitated. She sometimes disappeared for entire weekends. Said she was conducting independent verification of her findings. I always assumed she was using university labs where she had former colleagues. Before leaving, Sarah knelt to hug the twins once more. Your mother was the bravest person I've ever known, she told them. She would move mountains to protect you. After she departed, Jackson found the twins sitting unusually quiet in the living room. Sarah looked scared, Olivia observed. Like Mom did at the end. We'll protect Sarah, Jackson promised, and we'll find out what happened to your mother. That night after the twins were asleep, Jackson reviewed the flash drive's contents with Camilla. The evidence was damning. Systematic fraud that had potentially cost hundreds of lives. This would destroy Bennett Pharmaceuticals, Camilla said. Their stock would collapse overnight. And Bennett himself would face criminal charges, Jackson added. No wonder he was willing to go to such lengths to suppress it. He stared at the sleeping faces of his daughters, their existence a miracle he was still processing. Their mother had faced down one of the most powerful men in pharmaceuticals to protect patients and them. Had it cost Eleanor her life? Or was she still out there somewhere, as the twins so fervently believed? Jackson made a silent vow as he watched over them. He would finish what Eleanor started. He would protect their daughters. And he would uncover the full truth, no matter how dangerous the path. The headquarters of Bennett Pharmaceuticals rose like a gleaming monolith above the city skyline, its glass facade reflecting the morning sun. Jackson studied it from across the street. remembering how he'd once admired the building as a symbol of scientific progress. Now he saw it differently, a fortress hiding corruption. Inside his car, he reviewed his strategy. With the twins safely at his penthouse under Camilla's protection, he could focus on infiltrating Bennett's operation. His cover was simple: a potential investor interested in the upcoming pediatric Neuralin launch. The receptionist recognized him immediately. "Mr. Hayes, what an unexpected pleasure. Dr. Bennett didn't mention you were visiting today." A spur-of-the-moment decision. Jackson smiled disarmingly. "Is he available?" Bennett wasn't, but his second-in-command was. Victoria Coldwell greeted Jackson with professional courtesy that didn't reach her calculating eyes. "What brings a tech billionaire to our humble pharmaceutical company?" she asked, leading him through the research wing. "Looking to diversify?" "Something like that," Jackson replied. "I'm particularly interested in Neuralin. I hear the pediatric version is nearly ready for market." Victoria's smile tightened slightly. "Our most promising development. Trials have been extraordinarily successful, so I've heard. Though some might say suspiciously so." Jackson watched her reaction carefully. A flash of tension crossed her face before she recovered. "Science often delivers unexpected breakthroughs, Mr. Hayes." She showed him laboratories where white-coated researchers worked with precision instruments. Everything appeared immaculate, transparent, but Jackson noticed the keycard barriers, the surveillance cameras, the restricted areas. "I'd love to see the raw data from the pediatric trials," he mentioned casually. "My team performs independent analysis before any investment." "Of course," Victoria nodded. "Though it would require confidentiality agreements, proprietary methods, you understand." They passed a restricted laboratory where researchers huddled around screens displaying molecular structures. Jackson glimpsed the label Neuralin P before Victoria smoothly directed him away. As they approached a conference room, Jackson heard Bennett's unmistakable voice from inside. "I don't care what it takes. Hayes is becoming a problem just like Porter was. Find out what he knows." Victoria cleared her throat loudly before opening the door, giving Bennett just enough warning to compose himself. "Jackson," Bennett exclaimed with false warmth. "Victoria didn't tell me you were visiting. What a pleasant surprise." The conference room contained 3 other executives who watched Jackson warily. On the screen behind them, Jackson glimpsed financial projections for Neuralin P, $4.2 billion in first-year revenue. "Just exploring some investment opportunities," Jackson said smoothly. Bennett's smile remained fixed. "Always the entrepreneur. Though I'm surprised you're interested in pharmaceuticals. Quite different from your tech empire." "I go where the opportunities are," Jackson replied. "Though I believe in thorough due diligence. Safety profiles. Proper testing procedures." Something dangerous flickered in Bennett's eyes. "Our safety standards are impeccable, perhaps beyond what a tech executive would understand." The threat remained unspoken, but clear throughout their conversation. When Jackson departed, Bennett walked him to the elevator. "Curious timing for your interest in my company," Bennett remarked. "Right after taking in Eleanor's twins. Quite the coincidence." "I don't believe in coincidences," Jackson replied evenly. Bennett's mask slipped momentarily. "Neither do I. Some questions are better left unexplored, Jackson, for everyone's benefit." As the elevator doors closed, Jackson heard Bennett's final words. "Remember, children need stability. It would be tragic if anything disrupted that." Outside, Jackson noticed the security team photographing his departure. His phone buzzed with a message from Camilla. "You need to see this. Found financial records. Bennett made 6 payments to the driver who hit Eleanor's car." Jackson's resolve hardened. Eleanor's accident had been no accident at all. "I don't talk to billionaires," Diana Chen declared, barely looking up from her laptop at the corner table of the busy coffee shop, especially ones with ties to Big Pharma. Jackson sat down uninvited. "I don't have ties to Bennett Pharmaceuticals, but Eleanor Porter did, and she was trying to contact you before she died." The investigative reporter's fingers paused over her keyboard, her expression betraying nothing. "Eleanor Porter, the scientist who died in a car accident last year. The scientist who discovered Bennett was hiding deadly side effects of Neuralin, Jackson corrected. The scientist who had scheduled a meeting with you the day after her supposed accident. Diana closed her laptop. Alleged accident. And how? Would you know about any meeting? Instead of answering, Jackson placed a flash drive on the table. Raw data from the original Neuralin trials. Patient deaths systematically recategorized. Internal emails ordering the concealment of adverse effects. And financial records showing payments to the driver who hit Eleanor's car. Diana didn't touch the drive. Why bring this to me? You have enough resources to buy a media company if you wanted to publish this. Because Eleanor trusted you, and because Bennett has connections in traditional media channels that might suppress the story. Jackson leaned forward. Also, I believe you already have part of what Eleanor was gathering. Diana's carefully neutral expression confirmed his suspicion. What's your stake in this, Hayes? You build AI systems, why care about a pharmaceutical scandal? Jackson hesitated, then decided on the truth. Eleanor Porter's twin daughters are mine. I didn't know they existed until 3 days ago. Diana studied him with new interest. That changes things. But if what you're implying is true, that Bennett orchestrated her death, then you've put those girls in danger by taking them in. They were already in danger, Jackson replied. And I need to know if their mother is truly dead. You think she's alive? Diana asked incredulously. The twins believe it. And I've discovered her body was never properly identified. The accident left it supposedly unrecognizable, and the medical examiner was pressured to expedite the process. Jackson pulled out his phone showing her crime scene photos he'd obtained. The car was completely incinerated. Forensics shows accelerants were used. It wasn't an accident, it was staged. Diana was fully engaged now. You need Detective Marcus Lewis. He was lead investigator initially, but got pulled off the case when he raised questions about inconsistencies. Can you arrange a meeting? Diana nodded slowly. I'll contact him. But if we do this, we do it my way. No corporate cover-ups, no settling quietly, no matter how ugly it gets. That's exactly what I want, Jackson assured her. The full truth, publicly exposed. Later that evening, Jackson found Emma sitting alone in the penthouse library, studying Eleanor's diary with intense concentration. Any breakthroughs? He asked gently. She looked up with eyes so like his own. Mom used different coding systems for different sections. This part talks about the White Room where she did special research. Emma pointed to a diagram. I think it's not in the main building. Jackson sat beside her, impressed by her analytical mind. You're very good at puzzles. Mom taught us. She said sometimes the most important things have to be hidden in plain sight. Emma hesitated. She also said if anything happened to her, we should find the man in the photograph. Me? Jackson asked softly. Emma nodded. She kept your picture in her special box, the one with important things. She looked at him directly. Were you our dad? Is that why she kept your picture? The directness of her question caught Jackson off guard. Before he could answer, Olivia appeared in the doorway. Emma, that was supposed to be a secret until we were sure, she exclaimed. Jackson looked between his daughters, his heart constricting. Yes, he said simply. I believe I am your father. I just didn't know it until now. Why didn't you find us before? Olivia asked, her voice small. Because I didn't know about you, Jackson answered truthfully. If I had, I would have moved heaven and earth to be part of your lives. The three sat in momentary silence, the weight of what might have been hanging between them. We should find Mom together, Emma finally said. As a family, Central Park stretched before them in autumn glory, a mosaic of red and gold beneath a crisp blue sky. Jackson watched Emma and Olivia race ahead on the path, their identical blue coats fluttering behind them like wings. He'd insisted on buying them new clothes, though they'd protested they didn't need fancy things. 3 days into their unexpected cohabitation, Jackson was still adjusting to fatherhood. The twins had a routine they'd established in foster care. Emma always tied both their shoelaces. Olivia always poured their juice. They communicated in half-sentences and knowing glances, a private language he couldn't yet decipher. "They're remarkable," said Detective Marcus Lewis, walking beside Jackson. The former lead investigator on Eleanor's case was a weathered man with observant eyes and a reputation for integrity. "Porter raised them well." "She did everything well," Jackson replied quietly. "That was Eleanor. Brilliant, thorough, uncompromising." Lewis nodded. "That's what first raised my flags about the accident. Too neat, too convenient. The fire burned hot enough to destroy DNA evidence. The brake lines were cut, but in a way that would only fail at high speed. Professional job," Jackson concluded. "Extremely. When I tried to investigate further, I was reassigned. My captain cited resource allocation, but the order came from higher up." Lewis watched the twins now feeding ducks by the pond. "Diana Chen showed me what you've gathered. It's compelling, but still circumstantial. We need something that directly connects Bennett to the orchestration of the accident." "We're working on it," Jackson assured him. "My team is tracking the financial transactions to the driver." A shrill scream interrupted their conversation. Jackson's head snapped toward the pond where Olivia had ventured onto a decorative footbridge. The wooden railing had given way, and she now dangled precariously over the water. Jackson sprinted across the grass, heart pounding. He reached the bridge in seconds, lunging forward to grasp Olivia's wrist just as her grip failed. The momentum nearly pulled him in as well, but he braced himself against the remaining railing and hauled her up to safety. Olivia clung to him, shaking, her face pressed against his chest. Jackson held her tightly, the reality of how quickly he could have lost her hitting him with physical force. "You're safe," he murmured into her hair. "I've got you." Emma crashed into them, wrapping her arms around both. "Livy, you're okay." Detective Lewis examined the broken railing, his expression grim. This wasn't wear and tear. The supports were partially sawed through. Jackson's blood ran cold. He gathered both girls closer, scanning the park for watching eyes. "We're leaving. Now." Back at the penthouse, with security doubled, Jackson sat with the twins in the living room. Olivia had recovered from her scare with remarkable resilience, though she stayed closer to him than before. "You saved me," she said matter-of-factly, like the dad in Mom's stories. "What stories?" Jackson asked. "Mom told us bedtime stories about a brave inventor who built amazing machines to help people," Emma explained. "He always saved the day. When things got scary." "She said he lived far away, building important things," Olivia added. "But someday he might come back." Jackson's throat tightened. Despite everything, Eleanor had created a hero for their daughters, not a villain. "Did she tell you anything else about him?" he asked carefully. The twins exchanged one of their communicative glances. "She said we had his eyes," Emma answered. "And his brain for puzzles." "And his stubborn chin," Olivia added with a small smile. That night, after tucking them into bed in the guest room they shared, Jackson found himself overwhelmed by emotions he'd suppressed for years. He sat in his darkened office, staring at the city lights, remembering Eleanor as she'd been in their MIT days. Brilliant, passionate, principled. The only person who'd ever truly challenged him. Had she discovered she was pregnant after leaving? Had Bennett somehow forced her away from him? The timeline fit. Their sudden breakup, Bennett's immediate offer to fund Jackson's startup, all while Eleanor disappeared completely. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Emma stood in the doorway in pajamas too big for her slender frame. "Can't sleep?" Jackson asked. She shook her head, patting across the room to climb into the chair opposite his. "Olivia wants to know if you would have loved us," she said directly. "If you had known." The question pierced Jackson's carefully constructed defenses. "More than anything in this world," he answered, his voice rough with emotion. Emma studied him with those analytical eyes so like his own. "I think Mom still loves you," she said finally. "She cried sometimes looking at your picture." "I never stopped loving her," Jackson admitted, "even when I thought she'd chosen to leave." "Will you tell us about when you met her?" Emma asked. And so Jackson began the story of how he'd first encountered Eleanor Porter in an advanced robotics class, how she'd challenged his algorithm and improved it in one elegant stroke, how they'd stayed in the lab until dawn arguing theoretical approaches that would later become the foundation of his first patents. As he spoke, Olivia appeared silently in the doorway, listening. Eventually, both twins fell asleep on the large office sofa. Jackson covered them with a blanket, watching their peaceful faces. "I'll find your mother," he whispered. "Whatever it takes." Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over the annual Pharmaceutical Innovation Gala, where industry elites gathered in black tie and evening gowns. Jackson adjusted his bow tie, scanning the ballroom. Diana Chen had secured him an invitation as her source for a feature on pharmaceutical philanthropy. "Bennett always makes a grand entrance halfway through," Diana murmured, elegant in a simple black dress, her press credentials displayed prominently. "He considers himself the star attraction." "And Coldwell?" Jackson asked. "His shadow." "Never. More than 10 feet away at these functions." Diana nodded toward a cluster of FDA officials. "Bennett's cultivated impressive connections. 3 of those regulators previously worked for his companies." Jackson spotted the moment Bennett entered. The subtle shift in the room's energy, the deferential nods, the path clearing before him. Victoria Coldwell followed precisely 6 steps behind, resplendent in emerald silk that matched her calculating eyes. "Time to mingle," Diana said. "I'll work the regulatory crowd. You've got Bennett." Jackson circulated deliberately, positioning himself near Bennett's typical trajectory. When their paths finally crossed, he raised his champagne flute in mock salute. "Maxwell, quite the spectacle you've orchestrated." Bennett's smile remained fixed, though his eyes hardened. "Jackson, unusual to see you in pharmaceutical circles. Still playing guardian to Eleanor's girls?" "My girls," Jackson corrected, voice low enough that only Bennett could hear. A flicker of surprise crossed Bennett's face before disappearing. "Ah, you've made that connection. I wondered when you might." "You knew all along," Jackson stated. "Not a question. Eleanor was quite discreet, but pregnancy has visible symptoms." Bennett sipped his champagne. "She was brilliant but distracting you from your potential. You needed focus during those critical early startup days. So you separated us," Jackson concluded. "What did you tell her to make her leave?" Bennett's smile turned cold. "Nothing untrue. That you'd expressed frustration over her holding back your career. That you'd referenced her as a temporary diversion while discussing your 5-year plan with me." Jackson's grip tightened on his glass. "Lies. Selective truths," Bennett corrected. "She was already concerned about your workaholism, your ambition. I merely confirmed her fears. And then you hired her at Bennett Pharmaceuticals to keep her under your thumb." Bennett shrugged elegantly. "I recognized exceptional talent. When she discovered her pregnancy after leaving you, I offered security, advancement. Everyone benefited. Until she discovered what you were hiding about Neuralin," Jackson said. Bennett's expression hardened. "You're treading dangerous ground, Jackson. Eleanor made similar missteps. Accidents happen to those who don't understand their place in the ecosystem." Jackson stepped closer. "Was her death another selective truth you orchestrated?" "The official record stands," Bennett replied, coldly. "I'd be careful about spreading unfounded accusations. Think of the twins. Children need stability." His gaze drifted toward the entrance. "Speaking of which, I hear social services has questions about your sudden interest in guardianship." Before Jackson could respond, Victoria Coldwell appeared at Bennett's side, whispering urgently in his ear. Bennett's face darkened. "If you'll excuse me," he said tersely. "Urgent matter." As Bennett strode away, Diana approached with her phone displaying breaking news. "Whistleblower exposes potential fraud in Neuralin drug trials." "Sarah Wang went public," Diana said. "Limited details, but enough to spook Bennett." "He'll retaliate," Jackson warned. "We need to protect her." "Already arranged safe housing through my editor." As the gala continued, Jackson noticed Bennett and Victoria in intense conversation with several FDA officials. The network of influence was visible: handshakes, reassuring pats, confident nods. When Jackson departed shortly after midnight, he found his driver unconscious beside the car. The vehicle's brake lines had been cleanly cut. On the windshield, a handwritten note: "Not for you, for the twins' sake." The message was clear: back off, or Emma and Olivia would become targets again. Jackson's resolve hardened. Bennett had underestimated him just as he'd underestimated Eleanor. The time for careful investigation was over. He needed to strike directly at Bennett's empire before more lives were lost. Gray clouds hung heavy over Memorial Garden Cemetery, matching the somber mood of the small gathering. Jackson stood beside Detective Lewis and Diana Chen, watching, as cemetery workers prepared to exhume Eleanor Porter's grave. The court order had taken considerable legal pressure to obtain. The twins shouldn't be here for this, Jackson had insisted earlier that morning. They remained at the penthouse with Camilla, engaged in a mathematics lesson, a distraction Jackson had carefully arranged. Dr. Helena Bishop is the best forensic pathologist in the state, Lewis explained, as a petite woman in a practical raincoat approached. If there's anything to find, she'll find it. The exhumation proceeded with methodical precision. Jackson maintained his composure until workers lifted the casket from the earth. Despite his preparation, the reality of the moment, that Eleanor's remains might be inside, hit him with physical force. Dr. Bishop supervised as the casket was transported to a nearby tent for preliminary examination. The small group followed, tension thick in the air. "I'll need to document everything before opening," Bishop explained, photographing the casket from multiple angles. "The seal appears intact, no signs of previous disturbance." Jackson nodded, unable to speak. Diana squeezed his arm briefly in silent support. When Bishop finally opened the casket lid, her professional demeanor slipped momentarily. "This is unusual. Instead of human remains, the casket contained several sandbags arranged in a roughly human shape." "What the hell?" Lewis muttered, leaning closer. Bishop examined the interior carefully. "These weights approximate the body weight reported in the death certificate. There are no human remains in this casket." The implications crashed over Jackson in a wave. "She's not here." "No," Bishop confirmed, "and from the condition of these materials, I'd say this casket has never contained a body." The funeral was closed casket, Diana recalled. The official report cited severe burning from the car fire. Lewis was already on his phone requesting the original accident scene evidence. "We need to retest the blood samples from the crash site." Within hours, they gathered in Bishop's laboratory, where she completed her analysis of the original blood evidence. "It's human blood type AB negative, matching Eleanor Porter's recorded type," she confirmed. "But the quantity is inconsistent with a fatal accident. More importantly, the degradation pattern suggests it was refrigerated before being planted at the scene." "Could it have been drawn during medical treatment?" Lewis asked. "No. The preservation chemicals I'm detecting aren't used in emergency medicine." Bishop removed her glasses. "This blood was stored, likely from routine medical draws, then placed at the scene." Jackson's heart raced with the confirmation of what he'd begun to believe. "So there's no evidence she died in that crash?" "None," Bishop agreed. "In fact, I'd say there's compelling evidence that someone went to extraordinary lengths to fake her death." Back at the penthouse, Jackson found the twins waiting expectantly despite his attempts to shield them from the day's events. "You went to Mom's grave," Emma stated matter-of-factly. "Did you find her?" Jackson hesitated, then sat down at their level. "No, we didn't find her. But that might be good news." Olivia's eyes widened. "Because she wasn't there?" "Exactly." Jackson explained in simplified terms what they'd discovered. "I knew it," Olivia exclaimed, jumping up. "I told everyone she wasn't dead." Emma remained more analytical. "But where is she? Why would she hide from us?" "I don't think she's hiding from you," Jackson said gently. "I think someone is hiding her from us." Emma nodded seriously. It's the White Room. I've been dreaming about it. What White Room? Jackson asked. Where Mom is. In my dreams, she's in a room with white walls and no windows. She's working, but she looks sad. Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. She writes notes and hides them inside her shoes. Jackson exchanged glances with Diana, who had been silently observing. Children's dreams weren't evidence, but given everything they'd discovered, he wasn't dismissing anything. We're going to find her, he promised. And when we do, no one will separate our family again. The press conference room at the Grand Meridian Hotel buzzed with anticipation. Journalists from major outlets adjusted cameras and checked recording equipment, responding to the cryptic invitation, Groundbreaking Pharmaceutical Industry Expose, Bennett Pharmaceuticals Investigation. Behind the scenes, Jackson reviewed his presentation with Diana. Once we start this, there's no going back. Bennett will use every resource to discredit us. That's why we're doing it this way, Diana replied. Too public for them to suppress, too many outlets for them to control. Your tech background gives you credibility they can't easily dismiss. Detective Lewis entered the preparation room. Just got word. The FBI has opened a formal investigation based on the evidence we submitted. They're preparing warrants for Bennett Pharmaceutical servers. Sarah Wang sat nervously in the corner reviewing her talking points. As Eleanor's former research assistant, her testimony was crucial. Dr. Porter would be proud of this, she said quietly. This is what she wanted. The truth exposed, patients protected. At precisely 10 a.m., Jackson stepped to the podium, camera flashes erupting around him. The tech billionaire rarely gave press conferences, ensuring maximum attention. Thank all you for coming, he began. What I'm about to share will shock many of you. It involves systematic fraud, danger to public health, and potentially orchestrated violence, all to protect corporate profits. For the next 30 minutes, Jackson methodically presented their evidence, the falsified Neuralin trial data, the concealed cardiac risks, the pattern of suspicious deaths among whistleblowers, the staged accident, and finally, the empty grave. We have conclusive forensic evidence that Eleanor Porter's death was elaborately faked, Jackson stated. We believe she is being held against her will, possibly continuing her research under duress. The room erupted with questions. Diana stepped forward, directing the press to packets containing supporting documentation and her comprehensive investigative report publishing simultaneously online. As the conference concluded, Jackson's security team reported agitated activity at Bennett Pharmaceuticals headquarters. Stock prices were already plummeting in real-time trading. Mr. Hayes, a reporter called out as Jackson prepared to leave. Is it true that Eleanor Porter's twin daughters are your children? Is this investigation personal? Jackson paused, then returned to the microphone. Yes, Emma and Olivia are my daughters. I only discovered this recently after they found me at their mother's grave. And yes, this is deeply personal. But it's also about thousands of patients endangered by a medication known to be unsafe. Back at his command center, Jackson received reports from multiple fronts. Bennett Pharmaceuticals had issued a blanket denial, calling the allegations baseless attacks from a tech competitor seeking to manipulate markets. The FBI had executed their first warrants, and most significantly, Victoria Coldwell had contacted Diana's editor, seeking immunity in exchange for information. She's breaking ranks, Diana said excitedly. This is exactly what we needed. The meeting with Coldwell took place at her attorney's office under strict confidentiality. Her composure had cracked, replaced by the nervousness of someone who recognized a sinking ship. Bennett has a research facility that doesn't appear in any official records, she revealed. Built inside a mountain property he owns personally, registered as a private retreat. That's where Eleanor is. She's alive? Jackson demanded. Coldwell nodded. Bennett couldn't risk killing her. She's the only one who fully understands the molecular structure of Neuralin and its flaws. He needs her to fix the formula without admitting the original was defective. How do we know you're telling the truth? Diana pressed. Coldwell handed over a flash drive. Security footage, access codes, facility blueprints, everything you need to find her. Why help us now? Jackson asked. Because Bennett is planning to disappear with his contingency plan, Coldwell replied grimly. Taking Eleanor to an overseas location. The transport is scheduled for tomorrow night. Once she's out of the country, you'll never find her. Jackson studied the facility blueprints while his team verified Coldwell's information. The mountain complex was sophisticated with multiple security layers and limited access points. We can't wait for the FBI's bureaucracy, he decided. By the time they get approval for this location, Bennett will have moved her. You're not suggesting, Diana began. I'm not suggesting, Jackson interrupted. I'm stating. We're going. In tonight. The FBI field office buzzed with activity as agents processed the mounting evidence against Bennett Pharmaceuticals. Special Agent Cassandra Rivera, newly assigned to lead the investigation, reviewed the case files with growing alarm. The scale of this fraud is staggering, she told Detective Lewis. We've frozen Bennett's known accounts, but he has offshore resources we can't easily touch. He's planning to transport Eleanor Porter tonight, Lewis pressed. We need to move. On that mountain facility immediately. Rivera shook her head. The warrant for that property is still working through the system. It's privately owned outside corporate holdings. Judge Morris won't sign until morning. That's not good enough, Lewis argued. By then, Porter will be gone. Outside the federal building, Jackson waited in his car, on a secure line with Camilla. Surveillance confirms increased activity at the mountain property, she reported. Multiple vehicles arriving, equipment being loaded. They're definitely preparing for transport. Jackson made his decision. Implement Alpha Protocol. We move at nightfall. Across town, Diana Chen filed her latest story, revealing Victoria Coldwell's cooperation with authorities. The headline would hit within hours. Bennett Pharmaceuticals executive turned state's evidence. Claims kidnapped scientist held in secret facility. The media firestorm was intensifying. Bennett Pharmaceuticals stock had been suspended from trading after falling 30%. Patients were flooding physicians' offices with concerns about Neuralin. The FDA had announced an emergency review. At Jackson's penthouse, he briefed his assembled team, former military specialist from his corporate security division, each selected for discretion and skill. This is not a corporate operation, he emphasized. This is a rescue mission. Our sole objective is extracting Dr. Porter safely. Martha Wilson, the twins' social worker, had arrived earlier to stay with Emma and Olivia. Jackson found them in the library, heads bent over Eleanor's diary. We decoded more symbols, Emma announced. These coordinates match the mountain Ms. Diana talked about. Jackson knelt to their level. I have to go away tonight just for a little while. You're going to find Mom, Olivia stated with certainty. I'm going to try, he confirmed. I need you both to stay here where it's safe with Martha and the security team. Emma studied him with those analytical eyes. Promise you'll bring her back. I promise to do everything in my power, Jackson answered honestly. If you find her, Olivia said, tell her we never stopped looking. As dusk fell, Maxwell Bennett paced his private office at the mountain complex, watching security feeds with growing agitation. His carefully constructed empire was unraveling by the hour. The helicopter is fueled and ready, his head of security reported. We can depart with Dr. Porter at 2200 hours. And the research data? Bennett demanded. Being compiled now. Dr. Porter is finishing the final molecular analysis. Bennett nodded tersely. Once we reach the Cayman facility, initiate the server wipe protocol here. Nothing recoverable. In the laboratory 3 levels below, Eleanor Porter worked with mechanical precision, her face thin and pale from a year, in captivity. Her hands moved expertly across sophisticated equipment, completing the refinements to the Neuralin formula that Bennett had demanded. A guard stood by the door, watching impassively. Eleanor had learned their routines over months of observation, shift changes, security patterns, moments of inattention. She had been waiting, planning, ever since she'd seen Jackson's face on a news broadcast 3 days earlier. Something about the twins. Something that had given her the first spark of hope in a year. She carefully removed a tiny sample of the corrected formula. concealing it in a capsule she'd prepared weeks ago. Whatever happened tonight, this evidence would survive. On the mountainside, Jackson's team approached under cover of darkness. Their thermal imaging identified 22 security personnel patrolling the perimeter. The facility entrance resembled a luxury mountain home, its reinforced doors disguised with architectural elegance. "Security system is military grade," Camilla reported through their encrypted comms. "I'm accessing the bypass codes Coldwell provided now." The first alarm was silenced before it triggered. The outer doors opened with a pneumatic hiss. The team entered swiftly, neutralizing 2 guards with non-lethal tactics. "Splitly takes teams 3 and 4 to secure the helicopter pad and vehicle bay," Jackson ordered. "No one leaves this facility." They descended through the complex, encountering sporadic resistance. Most security personnel surrendered when faced with superior numbers and the realization that their employer's protection was evaporating. 3 levels down, they reached the research wing. Through reinforced glass, Jackson finally saw her, Eleanor, thin and tired but unmistakably alive, working at a laboratory station. His heart slammed against his ribs at the sight. When their team breached the laboratory doors, the guard reached for his weapon but quickly surrendered when outmanned. Eleanor looked up, shock replacing her clinical concentration. "Jackson?" Her voice was barely audible, disbelief etched on her features. "Eleanor." He crossed the room in 3 strides. "We need to get you out of here. Now." She stared at him, as if seeing a ghost. "Is this another of Bennett's manipulations?" "No," Jackson said firmly. "It's a rescue. Your daughters led me to you." "Emma and Olivia?" Tears filled her eyes. "They're safe?" "They're safe. They never believed you were dead." Jackson reached for her hand. "They sent me to find you." Eleanor's composure finally broke. She grabbed a small case from beneath her workstation. "We have to take this. Proof of what Bennett did. The corrected formula that shows he knew the original was flawed." Alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. "Perimeter breach," came Camilla's voice through comms. "Additional hostiles approaching. Looks like Bennett's private security contractors." "FBI just arrived too," reported another team member. "They're engaging the new hostiles." "Status on Bennett?" Jackson demanded. "Located on the helipad level. Attempting extraction." Jackson led Eleanor toward the exit, their team maintaining protective formation. The sounds of conflict echoed through the corridors, Bennett's arriving reinforcements clashing with both Jackson's team and the FBI agents who had arrived after obtaining their emergency warrant. They reached the upper level to find chaos, FBI, agents securing the facility, Bennett's security team members being detained, and Maxwell Bennett himself in handcuffs, his face contorted with fury as he was led to a federal vehicle. "This is a misunderstanding," Bennett was insisting to the stone-faced agents. "Dr. Porter has been working here voluntarily on classified research." When Bennett spotted Eleanor emerging with Jackson, his facade cracked completely. "You ungrateful bitch, I made you. I protected your research." Eleanor approached him with quiet dignity. "You falsified data and endangered thousands of patients. You separated me from my children. There's nothing you can say that matters anymore." Special Agent Rivera intercepted them. "Dr. Porter, we need to get you medical attention and take your statement." "Of course," Eleanor agreed. "But first I need to see my daughters." Dawn was breaking as they reached Jackson's penthouse. Eleanor had been examined by medical personnel, given preliminary clearance, and provided an initial statement to the FBI. The full debriefing would wait. Rivera had understood the priority of reuniting the family. The elevator doors opened to reveal Emma and Olivia waiting in their pajamas, Martha standing anxiously behind them. For a moment everyone froze in a tableau of disbelief. "Mom," Olivia whispered. Eleanor dropped to her knees, arms outstretched. "My babies." The twins crashed into her embrace with sobs of joy, the 3 clinging to each other as if afraid they might be separated again. Jackson stood back, his own vision blurring with tears as he watched them reunite. "We knew you weren't gone," Emma said fiercely. "We found your clues." "And we found Dad," Olivia added, reaching a hand toward Jackson. Eleanor looked up at him over the girls' heads, questions in her eyes. Jackson nodded gently, confirming what she'd clearly guessed from Olivia's words. They had much to discuss, years of manipulation and deception to unravel. But for now, this moment was enough. Their family, impossibly reunited against all odds. Martha discreetly wiped her eyes. "I'll make some breakfast," she murmured, giving the family space. The sun rose over the city skyline, illuminating the penthouse in golden light. Outside, news helicopters circled Bennett Pharmaceuticals' headquarters as federal agents continued their raid. Justice was in motion. Truth was emerging from darkness. And in a quiet moment amid the chaos, a family that had been fractured by greed and power found its way back together, guided by the unwavering belief of two small girls who had refused to accept the lie they'd been told. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of medical examinations, FBI debriefings, and media frenzy. Eleanor's miraculous return dominated headlines across the nation, her story of captivity and forced research generating public outrage. Bennett Pharmaceuticals stock was suspended indefinitely as investigations expanded to include international regulatory agencies. Through it all, Jackson ensured Eleanor and the twins remained protected in his penthouse, shielding them from the media circus. Private physicians monitored Eleanor's recovery, while specialized trauma counselors helped the family begin the healing process. On the third evening after the rescue, Jackson found Eleanor alone on the terrace, watching the sunset over the city skyline. Her slender frame seemed fragile in the fading light, but her eyes held the same fierce intelligence he remembered. "The girls finally fell asleep," he said, joining her by the railing. "They've been fighting it, afraid you might disappear again." Eleanor nodded, her gaze distant. "I've been afraid of the same thing, that I'll wake up back in that laboratory." "You're safe now," Jackson assured her. "Bennett's bail was denied. The evidence is overwhelming." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared history and separated years hanging between them. "Jackson," Eleanor finally said, turning to face him, "I never would have kept the twins from you if I'd had a choice. You need to know that." "I'm beginning to understand," he replied carefully. "Victoria Coldwell has been cooperating extensively. She confirmed that Bennett orchestrated our separation, threatened you when you discovered you were pregnant." Eleanor's eyes glistened with tears. "He showed me messages, emails, all fabricated, making it clear you didn't want family complications derailing your career. When I tried to contact you anyway, he threatened the girls directly." "And when you discovered the Neuralin fraud?" Jackson prompted gently. "He made it clear what would happen to the twins if I went public." Eleanor's voice hardened. "So I built my case secretly, created safeguards. I was so careful, but somehow he discovered my meeting with Diana." "The staged accident," Jackson concluded. Eleanor nodded. "They intercepted me after I dropped the girls at school. I woke up in the mountain facility. Bennett explained how thoroughly he'd faked my death, showed me news reports of my funeral. He said if I tried to escape, the twins would have a real funeral to attend." Jackson's hands tightened on the railing. "I should have looked for you years ago, should have questioned what happened between us." "We both believed Bennett's lies," Eleanor said softly. "He manipulated us masterfully." Inside the penthouse, Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Mom? Dad? Are you still here?" They turned in unison, both moving instinctively toward their daughter. Eleanor reached her first, kneeling to embrace her. "We're both here, sweetheart. We're not going anywhere." "Olivia had a bad dream," Emma explained. "She needs you too." They found Olivia curled in her bed, tears streaking her face. When she saw them all together, she launched herself into their collective embrace. "I dreamed the bad man took Mom away again," she whispered. "No one will ever separate us again," Jackson promised, holding his family close. "We're together now." Later, after the twins had fallen back asleep, Eleanor and Jackson sat in the living room, photo albums spread before them. Martha had retrieved them from Eleanor's sealed apartment. "They're so much like you," Eleanor said, tracing a picture of the twins building an elaborate block structure. Emma's analytical mind, Olivia's determination. "They have your brilliance," Jackson countered, "and your courage." Eleanor paused at a photo of herself pregnant, standing by a window with hands protectively over her belly. "I wanted to tell you so many times, even wrote letters I never sent." "We can't recover those years," Jackson said gently. "But we can move forward." "As what?" Eleanor asked, the question that had hovered unspoken between them. "As a family," Jackson answered simply. "Whatever form that takes." In the quiet nighttime hours, they began rebuilding the trust that Bennett had systematically destroyed between them, one honest conversation at a time. 3 weeks after Eleanor's rescue, Jackson stood on the porch of a seaside cottage watching Emma and Olivia race along the shoreline. Their laughter carried on the salt breeze, a sound that still caused his heart to swell with wonder. They were his daughters, a miracle he was only beginning to fully comprehend. The beachfront property in a quiet coastal town was far from the calm city's chaos. Jackson had purchased it within days of Eleanor's return, recognizing their need for privacy and healing away from media scrutiny and painful memories. The trial preparations against Maxwell Bennett dominated national headlines. His empire was crumbling as investigations uncovered decades of fraud across multiple medications. Former employees came forward daily with new allegations. The FBI had frozen his assets worldwide. Justice was progressing, but recovery was a more delicate process. "They look happy," Eleanor said, joining Jackson on the porch. Her color had improved with each passing day, strength returning to her frame, though shadows still lingered in her eyes at unexpected moments. "They are resilient," Jackson replied. "Like their mother." Eleanor smiled faintly. "And stubborn like their father." Inside the cottage, their legal teams had departed after finalizing paperwork, establishing a foundation to support victims of pharmaceutical fraud. Eleanor's corrected Neuralin formula would be made available to all manufacturers, potentially saving thousands of lives. "Diana called," Eleanor mentioned. "Her exposé on Bennett's broader corruption has been nominated for a Pulitzer." Jackson nodded. "She deserves it. Without her, we might never have found you." They watched the twins building an elaborate sandcastle, their coordination seamless, communicating through glances and half-words in their private twin language. "They need stability now," Eleanor said quietly. "After everything they've been through." "What do you need, Eleanor?" Jackson asked, the question they'd been carefully navigating for weeks. She turned to face him, her expression both vulnerable and resolute. "Honesty. No more secrets between us. Bennett exploited our weaknesses because we weren't transparent with each other." "I was obsessed with success," Jackson acknowledged. "Building my company consumed me. I can see why you believed I wouldn't want the complication of family." "And I was too proud to demand answers," Eleanor countered. "Too quick to accept that you'd moved on without me." Their hands found each other's on the porch railing, the contact tentative but intentional. "The twins want us to be a family," Eleanor continued. "They've been dropping hints about sharing a home permanently." Jackson smiled. "Subtle ones, like Olivia asking if I'll be their real dad forever, and Emma designing bedroom layouts for all of us?" Eleanor laughed softly. "They get their directness from you." "What do you want, Eleanor?" Jackson asked, his voice gentle but serious. She considered the question, watching their daughters by the shoreline. "I want to rebuild what Bennett stole from us, not necessarily returning to the past, but creating something new, something honest." "Co-parenting? Friendship?" Jackson pressed carefully. Eleanor met his gaze directly. "I think we both know there's still more between us than that." Before Jackson could respond, the twins came racing up the beach path, faces flushed with excitement. "Dad, Mom, come see our castle," Olivia called. "It has a moat with real water." "And a laboratory wing," Emma added seriously. "For Mom's research." And a computer room for Dad's inventions, Olivia finished. Jackson and Eleanor exchanged glances, both recognizing the not-so-subtle symbolism of their daughter's creation. "We're coming," Eleanor called back, her fingers still entwined with Jackson's. That evening, after the twins were asleep in their new rooms filled with books and toys, Eleanor and Jackson sat on the porch swing, a comfortable silence between them. "I filed the paperwork to legally establish paternity," Jackson said. "If that's agreeable to you." Eleanor nodded. "The girls need that security." "And I've been thinking about your research," he continued. "The Hayes Porter Foundation will need a brilliant scientific director." "Are you offering me a job, Mr. Hayes?" Eleanor asked with a hint of her old spark. "I'm offering you a partnership," he corrected. "Equal control, shared mission." Eleanor smiled. "I accept." Under the stars they began mapping their future, not rushing to reclaim what was lost but carefully building something stronger. Bennett had manipulated their past, but he would not define their future. 1 year later, the Hayes Porter family stood together on the same cemetery grounds where their journey had begun. The morning sunlight filtered through autumn leaves, casting dappled shadows across the now empty plot where Eleanor's headstone had once stood. "It feels strange to visit my own grave," Eleanor remarked, placing a bouquet of white roses on the grass. "Not your grave," Emma corrected firmly. "Just a place that helped us find each other." The past year had transformed them all. Eleanor had reclaimed her health and professional standing, now directing breakthrough research at the Hayes Porter Foundation. Jackson had shifted his corporate priorities, dedicating significant resources to healthcare ethics and patient advocacy. The twins had blossomed in their stable environment, their exceptional minds nurtured by both parents. "Bennett's sentencing is tomorrow," Jackson said quietly. Eleanor nodded. 15 years minimum, the prosecutor says. No possibility of early parole. "Is it enough?" Olivia asked, her young face serious beyond her years. "The important thing isn't his punishment," Eleanor explained, kneeling to her daughter's level. "It's that the truth came to light. Thousands of patients now have safer medication because of what happened." In the distance, they spotted Diana Chen approaching with Detective Lewis. The unlikely allies had become part of their extended family circle through the shared ordeal. "The Murdoch family sends their thanks," Diana told them, referencing one of many families who had lost loved ones to Neuralin's hidden side effects. "Their lawsuit settlement will cover their children's education through college. And the FDA has implemented the new clinical trial transparency protocols you recommended," Lewis added. "They're calling it the Porter Standard internally." After a moment of respectful silence at the gravesite, they moved toward their waiting cars. The cemetery visit had become a ritual, not to mourn, but to commemorate the beginning of their journey back to each other. That evening, Eleanor stood at the podium of a medical ethics conference, addressing an auditorium filled with researchers, physicians, and policymakers. "Truth in science is not a luxury. It's a necessity," she stated, her voice steady and passionate. "When we compromise data for profit, we betray the fundamental covenant between medicine and humanity." In the front row, Jackson watched with pride, the twins beside him taking careful notes in matching journals. Emma had already demonstrated remarkable aptitude for biomedical concepts, while Olivia showed natural talent for advocacy and communication. Different strengths, complementary purposes, much like their parents. Back at their seaside home later that night with the twins asleep, Eleanor and Jackson sat on their favorite porch swing, watching moonlight dance across the waves. "I filed the final paperwork today," Jackson said, taking Eleanor's hand. "The adoption is official. Emma and Olivia Hayes Porter." Eleanor smiled. "They've been practicing writing their new names for weeks." "There's one more name change I've been considering," Jackson continued, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. Eleanor turned to face him, eyes questioning. From his pocket, Jackson produced a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, not ostentatious despite his wealth, but elegant in its simplicity, a deep blue sapphire that matched their daughter's eyes. "We've rebuilt our family piece by piece this year," he said softly. We've healed old wounds and created something stronger than what was broken. Eleanor's eyes glistened in the moonlight. Are you asking what I think you're asking? I'm asking if you'll make it official, Jackson replied. Not because of the girls, not because of our shared past, but because this year has shown me that what I feel for you now is even stronger than before. Eleanor took the ring, turning it gently in the moonlight. We're different people than we were 10 years ago. Better people, Jackson agreed. With clearer priorities. The girls will be impossible once they hear about this. Eleanor laughed softly. They've been plotting this outcome for months. Is that a yes? Jackson asked. Eleanor slipped the ring onto her finger. It's a yes. They sealed their promise with a kiss, the sound of waves providing gentle accompaniment to this new beginning. Inside the house, two small figures crept back from the window where they'd been spying, exchanging triumphant smiles. Finally, whispered Olivia. Statistically inevitable, Emma agreed with satisfaction. The twins returned to their beds, secure in the knowledge that their family, once fractured by lies, was now whole, strengthened by truth and bound together, by love that had survived the most determined efforts to destroy it. The truth, as Emma and Olivia had always known, had finally found its way into the light.